Welcome to the February 21st, 2023 regular planning meeting of the San Ramon Planning Commission. We'll call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Can the recording secretary please conduct roll?
Commissioner Kuznick,
I'm here.
Commissioner Marks,
Here.
Commissioner Wallace,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Edwards,
Here.
and Chair Alpert.
Here. Item 3 is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise and join me in the pledge. Item 4 is public comment or written communications. At this time, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any item not currently in tonight's agenda. If you'd like to speak, please fill out the speaker card located at the back of the room and submit it to the recording secretary. And if you're participating remotely, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to request to speak. Do we have any late communication speaker cards or audience members that would like to speak?
No.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public comment then and move on. Okay. Item 5, additions and revisions. We have none. Item 6 is a consent calendar item, and there are 2 of them. Item 6.1 is the TAC appointment, and item 6.2 is the general plan annual report. Do we have any public comments on this item?
No.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public comment on that. We can approve both items with a single motion. So at this time, if you could look at your screen and press the move button. Moved by Commissioner Marks and seconded by Commissioner Wallace. Okay, and it's 5-0-0. Thank you. Okay. Item 7 are minutes from our January 31st special meeting and our February 7th regular meeting. And do we have any written comments on this item?
No.
No, good. Okay, we'll move on. So do we have any discussion, comments? Recall that they were modified at our request after the last meeting. Seeing none, if we could have a motion to approve both sets of minutes.
I will move approval of the minutes.
Okay, now you press the green button. Okay. Great. Okay, 5-0-0-0. We can move on. Okay, item 8 is continued items after the close of the public hearing, and there are none. Item 9 is continued items, public hearing, and item 10 is the public hearing new items. Item 10.1, which is the revised fire district training facility. And tonight we have Ryan Driscoll coming to the podium.
All right, good evening, Chair Alpert and Planning Commissioners. So this is the Fire District Training Facility Project Revisions item for you tonight. So the subject property is 3.26 acre parcel at the corner of Bollinger Canyon Road and Crow Canyon Road. It currently has the administrative building for the fire district and a fire station on site. The general plan is public, semi-public. And the zoning is also public and semi-public, PS. So a little bit of background. This project was originally approved by the Planning Commission on February 4th, 2020 for the Fire District Training Facility project at a public hearing. And then on March 10th of 2020, the City Council conducted a public hearing on an appeal on the project. And the council approved the project subject to the conditions of approval and denied the appeal. And that project approval by the council with that resolution and project plans are attached to the staff report tonight. On September 14th of 2022, the fire district and the applicant submitted the proposed plans before you tonight and applications to revise the project, which I'll describe in a little more detail here coming up. On December 2nd, 2022, the 10-day public notice was sent out for the zoning administrator intending to approve the subject applications. And based on the comments received during that 10-day public notice period, the ZA or zoning administrator determined to refer the project to the Planning Commission at a public hearing for a decision, which is what we're holding tonight. So the proposed project includes architectural and site plan changes, which in effect give a more efficient land use pattern for the site. It consolidates uses and structures on the site, resulting in about a 5,200 square foot change in the buildings and structures on site increase. It also increases the perimeter landscape area along Bollinger Canyon Road. And this slide has the overall site plan for the training facility on the right and the existing fire station on the left. So I have some slides here that walk through some of the changes because there's a lot going on the site. So the first is with the classroom building. It's now being described as the classroom reserve apparatus building, and it's being increased by about 1,700 square feet. On the top left is the approved site plan from the council. On the bottom right is the proposed site plan. You can see it's the footprint of the building has been kind of squared off a bit. This is the floor plan for the classroom building, the approved and proposed floor plans. The approved is on the left, the proposed is on the right. Again, it's providing some kind of more storage areas, enclosing what was the patio into more of a break room, and redoing the layout a bit for some of the interior spaces. So the project also increases the training tower building footprint by about 300 square feet, in the area of the training tower by about 2,840 square feet. It combines some prop training areas there. The training tower location on the approved site plan and proposed site plan are shown on this slide here. Here's a rendering. The approved tower rendering is on the left, and the proposed tower renderings on the right. There's some additional proposed renderings in the project plans, but the overall design is consistent and similar. It has the same slope roof that was requested by the Architecture Review Board during the last review. And I should mention too, it's the same height, maximum height, 45 feet. There's also, on the approved site plan, there was an area called the roof prop. It was just south of the classroom building on the site plan there. And what's the proposed site plan combines the confined space and trench training areas into that roof prop building, which is now being called a mall prop structure. It's being also increased by about 500 square feet to do that, and increases the height to 16 feet tall, about 4 feet taller. And so that mall prop structure, the new one, is on the proposed site plan just south of the classroom building. So the pump house location's generally the same, but it's been increased by about 160 square feet in size on the proposed site plan. Also, the project would remove, there were 5 approved parking spaces that would be removed. And then they're indicating incorporating a splash wall into the exterior enclosure of the site, which is shown by the smaller red box area on the proposed site plan. And then lastly, there's some changes to the landscape and overall enclosure area for the training facility. It's been brought in from Bollinger Canyon Road. So there's additional landscape. They're retaining some existing trees and also proposing a few more trees in the red box area on the proposed site plan, and then bringing in the site enclosure fence a bit as a result. So in terms of land use and development standards, the proposed revised project continues to be classified as a public safety facility land use. It's permitted by right in the PS zone. And then there's a number of applicable development standards that are described in the staff report and shown on the slide here. Won't go in detail, but it complies with the applicable development standards. Staff has received a number of public comment during that initial 10-day public notice period. We've attached those comments to the staff report for you tonight. Generally, there are some comments on various topics related to concerns about the tower design, landscape, and noise concerns. And it's important to remember too, with the proposed project, the proposed conditions of approval will remain the same as the approved conditions. And they'll also reiterate compliance with the city's noise ordinance. So staff recommends the commission receive the staff report and presentation by the applicant, open the public comment, take public testimony, close the public comment, discuss and deliberate, and adopt draft planning commission resolution number 03-23, approving the project applications. And the draft reso is attached to the staff report for your review. So I'm available for questions or comments, and we do have the project applicant also available for a presentation.
Did they want to speak first, or they just want ready here for questions?
Yeah, well,
Sure.
they can do the presentation.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and let them.
We have Jeff Katz from the Core Design Group.
Perfect.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Good evening. Pleasure to be here this evening. I'm Jeff Katz, president of Core Design Group, the architect on the project. Also have Frank Drayton and Jonas Aguilar from Fire District here. Happy to answer any questions you may have after my presentation as well. So just wanted to give you a little background on why it's been 3 years since we were here before you the first time on this project. So in order to move forward with this project, the Fire District needs to vacate their current administration building. That's going to happen when we complete construction on the public safety facility at 2401 Crow Canyon that's under construction now. So when that project is complete, the Fire District administrative facilities will move there, and then this project will move forward. So that's why there's been this 3-year lag from when this project was originally approved. In that time, there have continued to be improvements made and recommendations from the state in terms of training procedures for firefighters. And as part of that, we have tried to implement all of the best practices for fire personnel training into this project as well. So the slide you see on the screen, Ryan did a great job of walking you through all of the changes that we made. So this was the original design that we had presented 3 years ago. Let's see. All right, how's that? And this is our proposed design now. So as Ryan noted, the what we're calling the mall prop building on the far right has gotten larger from what was originally proposed. However, the reason for that is that we have taken roughly 3,500 square feet of site area that was previously on site below grade prop areas. So the confined space training was essentially down in a pit, and the trench rescue prop was also a pit. We've taken those elements off the site and incorporated them into the building itself, so that we're trying to clean that up and eliminate any visual issues out on that site. So those elements are all incorporated into the mall prop building. We also, the classroom building was enlarged to incorporate some restrooms that could be accessible from the training grounds for firefighters where they're training, so they don't have to go into the building. As well as we've added additional storage so that we don't have any outdoor elements that need to sit out on that site. Everything can be put away in the evening or when training is done for the day. And then lastly, the pump house building grew in size to incorporate a breathing air compressor within the building. The alternative would be a portable unit that would have to come out on site when they're refilling their breathing apparatus for training exercises. This way, we've been able to incorporate that structure into the pump house building itself. So while the overall square footage has increased a little bit, it's really a matter of trying to take elements from within the site and incorporate them into building area. And so just to touch briefly on some of the significant changes, and I don't expect you to read this text on the screen, but the trench prop, which was an element that was on the site. There have been a lot of changes and recommendations from the state and best practices for trench rescue training, and so that has been eliminated. The confined space prop, again, was down in a very deep pit. That's now been moved inside the building. The training classroom, as I mentioned, has grown. The vent prop, which was formerly called the roof prop, which was sitting on grade, is now been incorporated into the mall prop building as well and has gotten smaller. And then the tower itself, the tower square footage, the footprint of the tower has not changed very much at all. I think Ryan referenced 300 square feet. Most of the change in the total area of that building, we added a basement level for additional training. We've added some additional components of that to allow the fire district to have training opportunities for single-story, two-story bedroom components, just a variety of different training exercises that can be incorporated into that tower. And then, as I mentioned, the pump house expansion as well. So all of these changes were made in an effort to clean up the site and really provide the best possible training scenarios for this fire district going forward. So with that, happy to turn it over to Chief Drayton.
Chair, Vice Chair, Planning Commissioners, what I don't want to do is repeat Jeff up here the whole time. So just in our concept from 3 years ago was to really take the feedback from the community, which that's extremely important to us. We do not want a dirty site. We want a site that's maintainable, clean. We went out and looked at some brand new sites that were built within the last 5 years, and we learned a lot. When we train, we have our gear on, our personal protective clothing. It gets wet, a little smelly. And the first thing they said is, don't do what we did and not put exterior bathrooms, because they walk into a nice kind of training classroom and they're wet, smelly. So we added some exterior bathrooms. In the storage side of the prop, or the actual building, we pretty much doubled the storage size just to make sure that thing doesn't get left outside. Things don't get left around. The confined space prop, we just re-implemented that inside a building. Instead of having this open pit that everybody can see with stairs walking down it, because we have to eliminate the confined space option. So we have to simulate confined space. So you got to have stairs. And so we just wanted to put that inside above grade. So there is no confined space. They're still in a pipe, but they're at grade level. So we tried to really keep as much as we can in mind with the site, and not because we planned it, but when it was done, we looked at the site from the old site to the new site and went, wow, this is actually a lot cleaner, more accessible, easier to maintain. And I'll just touch on the breathing support side of the pump house. We added, I think it was 150 square feet to put a permanent breathing air system. Right now, the only way we get breathing air on the fire ground is we have a big breathing air support unit that drives to the scene. We kick on the compressors. It's extremely loud. So we thought, let's not get the site with that thing, because that's just adding more equipment. So we proposed a actual permanent fixed breathing machine within a concrete building. So we don't have to bring that out to use it. Happy to answer any questions. I brought Jonas Aguilar, who was the lead on getting these designs completed. So we can both happy to answer any questions.
I was able to get the large plans Friday afternoon, and I was able, when I sat down at my coffee table today, I think I was able to work my way through some of the changes, but I just wanted to make sure that I'm reading your maps correctly. My first question really is driven by one of our conditions of approval that says that the impervious surface on this site has been reduced. Could you explain how that occurred?
Oh, one of the ways that that happened is that our fence line has pulled back onto the site. So previously, I'll go back to the original slide. Previously, our fence line ran out here outside the confined space. So it's now pulled back in here. And so we are adding landscaping in this area that was previously impervious or paved.
So basically you're taking out the impervious and adding the pervious.
Right, we're putting the pervious that's there now.
Okay,
back,
got it.
basically.
Got it. Okay, I had a couple of questions. First, about the pump station, actually the drawings refer to what's called an air station. I'm guessing that's the compressor. Okay, so you increase the size of the pump station to move what would be a mobile loud air compressor inside a building that presumably will cut down on the noise.
That's correct.
Okay. Second of all, it seemed to me after I finally worked my way around the drawings for the revised classroom that the space that you added and the size increase in this project is one of the things that was talked about in virtually every email I saw. What you're doing is you're actually adding space to the building away from Bollinger Canyon so that essentially the original building is actually screening the additional area that you're adding behind it for the restrooms, for the additional storage areas. It also looked like the APP bay was also increased again away from Bollinger Canyon. That fair?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, what does the word prop mean?
It's a training prop. It's a device that simulates what we actually do in the real world.
Okay.
So a roof prop, when we climb up on a roof, and it doesn't have electrical, water, utilities, it's just a structure.
Sort of this prop when you used making a movie, sort of the same concept.
Same concept.
Now, the mall that you've added along the side of the building, it actually replaces two areas that were in your original program, but it does encapsulates them in the building instead of having a trench on the property.
That is correct.
Okay, so in terms of you're adding a part of a building, but you're taking out what was already there. So the floor space you're actually using is pretty much the same.
Agreed.
And that, okay, just trying to make sure I got that right. One of the comments that was made in some of the emails was a concern by the people over at Thomas Ranch that the redwood trees might be taken out as a result of the project. Now, when I went out again to the project site, the redwood trees are actually in front of the fire department station, not the area that you're going to be working on. Is that right?
That is correct. They're
And-
completely unaffected.
Okay, okay. Now, one of the comments that was made, and this is where the architect might come in. There were, as I read it, they were complaining about the change of the roof on the tower from hipped to flat. And is there any change in the roof design?
The tower roof has stayed the same from what was approved previously. We made a change based on recommendations from architectural review originally that recommended the roof form that you see there now. And that has not changed from what this group approved the first time.
Oh, okay, because that was one of the comments that was in a number of the emails that we received today was a complaint that the tower itself had changed from what had been approved back in 2020 and what at least some people thought the homeowners association had negotiated with the fire department. In terms of the increase to the tower, it looked to me like there were two additions primarily. One was you added a basement, which wasn't there before, that increased the floor area of the entire tower. And it seemed that on the third level, there seemed to be a a room that was created, I assume as a prop room for some type of fire training?
Yes, we took the original roof prop that was like a permanent structure. And we actually put it on the second floor, but made it a lot smaller. So it was less intrusive, I guess.
Okay. One of the questions that was raised at the original hearings back in 2020 had to do with the sound. I know there was a sound study. Again, it was mentioned in the report today about the possibility of doing a sound wall, which I'm assuming was really along Bollinger from where the fire station is to Crow. There is a condition of approval that talks about looking at the possibility of doing that. But my question is, who gets to make the final call on whether there should be a sound wall out there?
And Jeff, you can help me on this, but I think the original plan had that, and the architectural review board did not want a block wall. They wanted a nice contemporary, the slatted fencing that
Okay.
that we did.
Oh, okay, because that was again, one of the subjects that was raised in the emails that we saw. So I want to be clear that the lack of a sound wall, at least according to your current drawings, is based on an ARB recommendation.
Yes, we added this style of fencing based on the ARB.
Okay. I had a question about the splash wall. I guess you do some hosing down of things over there. It looked to me like the current version would be 14 feet, but the version that was approved back in 2020 was 20 feet. Am I correct? You've dropped the size of the wall?
Yes, and
Okay.
in the effect of, we added a little, like a roof. So when the water hits it, it's going to hit the roof and then
Yeah.
come down, because we're obligated to recapture the water that
Right.
we use on site versus the streams going on Bollinger.
Okay, so you're actually reducing the size of that splash wall. Okay. Okay. That's all the questions I had.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a couple of additional questions. Again, referring back to the various emails we got, there was one of the homeowners was concerned that there was a gap in landscaping and had circled some pictures. Can you speak to that issue? Because it's hard to tell on what I saw, whether it was
Yeah,
just.
the landscape plans were included in the overall package, show both the existing trees and the new landscaping. The drawing that you're looking at here on the screen is really just showing the new landscaping that's in filling. So what appears in this drawing to be gaps is really, it's really not gaps. And you can see that more clearly on the landscape plan that you have.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm going to ask you to speak a little bit about the difference in the rendering of the tower. And I'm going to refer back to this page in our packet. It seems to me that there's a lot of concern about this tower appearing to be more massive. And I guess when I look at this, what I see is the difference in the corners that are supporting the roof. I don't have a packet
Yep.
page.
So I think what you're referring to is these corner elements here. So
Yes,
as opposed to,
that they give the appearance of being beefier
yes.
than the design that we had. And I think people found that objectionable. So could you speak a little bit about
Yes.
speak a little bit about that?
Sure, happy to. So the original drawing did not incorporate structural engineering at the time we did that. So when we took our imagery to and design to our structural engineer, he said, I can't make that stand up. So really, this is a matter of making sure that we're designing a structure that is safe, that isn't going to come down. And so the width of those panels to meet the shear requirements in California needed to increase.
Thank you. I have one more quick question about the size of those panels. And architecturally and visually, does it make it look less imposing if it's lighter or less imposing if it's dark? If you were trying to make it sort of fade away.
You're talking about in terms of the block colors that we're using?
But just if I'm one of those neighbors going like, gee, I wish that didn't look so massive. Just the supporting the supports for the roof.
Yeah, I think that there's almost no head-on view of this where you're picking up the width of those panels.
Okay.
Everything that you're seeing is at an angle.
Okay.
Which is why we tried to replicate the rendering and an angled view here, because really anywhere on the street or from any of the residences, that's kind of the view that you're seeing.
Okay.
And so rather than one of the reasons that we're staying with block as the material here is just its durability and longevity for the fire district. And so incorporating steel elements where we might be able to reduce the mass of those, but we're spraying water out here on those steel elements is just going to be problematic for the
Okay.
district long term.
Thank you. And I have one more question for the fire department. You talked about the air compressor running. Is there a time frame in which this will be used that the neighbors could be cognizant of it?
So it's only used during operations.
Okay.
So just like the conditions of approval state, we can only use the site within those timeframes.
Okay.
And also we basically doubled the storage capacity of the tanks.
Mhm.
So we don't have to turn it on as much.
All right. Thank you. Those are the questions that I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions for the chief. What would be the maximum number of trainees that are on site on the outside in the exterior of any building that are doing training? How many would be there at any one time?
So I think in our history, and Jonas, you could probably help, I think our largest academy was 15 people.
I'm sorry,
Was
15?
Kind of, yeah. Usually it's 8 to 12. We have one right now that has 9. We generally run one a year for 16 weeks.
Mhm.
And they're there from 8 to 5. And then they go online after that. And then the rest of the year is just used for what we call our annual training, monthly training. So they, 1 or 2 crews will come in for an hour or 2 and then leave.
Okay.
But generally our class size for academies are anywhere from, I think the smallest one was 5 once and the largest was 15 people. It's all based on who's going to retire. So,
Okay. I looked at the parking in the back and I thought, well, it could be a lot larger than that, but 15 sounds reasonable to me. How often does exterior training occur? Is it weekly? Is it 5 days a week for 15 weeks? How long does that go on?
no, the weekly training is generally engine company based. So it's generally 3 to 6 to 7 folks that'll be assigned by the training division to come in to meet certain state, local, federal mandate training. They'll get it done and get back. So generally, I mean, reality, it's 9 to noon, 11:30, because then we gotta let them go back and eat, and then they'll maybe come back from 2 to 4 or 5 o'clock. So generally, it's not a full 8 hours of training unless it's an actual fire academy.
Yeah, but again, how many days a week when it's going on?
It's just strictly Monday through Friday, and on Saturday, based on the conditions of approval, it's got to be inside.
Okay. When we get to the conditions of approval, there is reference to allowing other agencies to use the facilities. In your agreements with these agencies, would it be problematic to limit the number of their trainees who can be on the site on the exterior at any one time?
I was under the impression we don't allow agencies, we're not allowing them to use this.
Well, when we get to the condition,
Yeah, if
I'll
we
read
could-
the language that,
Yeah, we
It does
generally
allow that.
don't have a plan because they're so busy. We can't use theirs. Everybody's getting busy
Yeah.
around us. I thought one of the conditions of approval, I can't let Con Fire come over without us. Now, if we're doing a joint mutual aid training, then yes, but if we're not there, we don't allow them to use this site.
okay, well, the condition in the beginning says what you are familiar with, but it says joint training with other agencies is allowed subject to all operational limitations. Joint training, what I'm saying is putting a limitation on the number of people that are on the exterior when you're doing joint training. Would that be problematic for the fire district?
Based on the number, I don't see that being problematic. When we do joint training, it's generally 1 or 2 engine companies because you can't strip your whole agency. So
Sure.
they'll generally send 1 or 2. We'll send 1 or 2, do something jointly, and then we'll send everybody back, and that's 12 to 15 folks.
Okay. Again, I'm just trying to get a
Yeah.
sense of, if noise is the concern, then certainly the number of people that are outside doing whatever it is they're doing and the frequency with which they do it is what I'm trying to just get a handle on. And your answers are just fine. Thank you.
I had just one question, but I think it's probably best answered by police.
Oh.
And he happens to be here. Chief Carlson, thank you. Thanks for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
Two questions. One, we saw a number of emails that there were questions about what the joint police fire training or how the police might be using the training facility. Could you speak to that a bit?
Sure. I think that anytime we would have the opportunity to use a facility, we would consider that for training. And this would be no different than what we've done in the past 7 or 8 years when certain buildings have been vacated within the Bishop Branch area, as we use those internal areas for training opportunities that we don't normally have. It could be any type of training. It could be everything from just simple building searches where we're using techniques and just working together to make sure operationally we're all on the same page. It could be everything up to including some of the comments that I've seen out there associated with active shooter training. With every single safety precaution that we've always done when we've done any type of training like this within the city of San Ramon. We've done these types of trainings at the high schools. We've done them at elementary schools. And using an opportunity like this, looking at the tower there, I could see where it could pose training opportunities for members of our agency to go in. Rest assured, every safety precaution would be taken. We would never, ever do any type of training within the city limits associated with any type of live fire or any live ammunition. That is not even within the realm of possibilities. Every time we train with something like that, it's done at an approved range with every single safety precaution, nowhere near any neighborhoods or anything like that. The only time that I've ever, that I can recall over the past really 15 years where we've had any type of training that resulted in very large noise, we did a full joint training exercise with San Ramon Valley Fire and several other local agencies for active shooter training at the California High School. And when we did that, we issued notices to everyone in the surrounding area that, hey, on this date, between these hours, we're going to be conducting an active shooter training. No live ammunition would be heard, but you may hear some loud noises. And so that was done once. And I believe that training was 5 or 6 years ago. And that's the only time that we've ever done anything like that.
And you answered my second question about the use of live ammo in the facility. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Chair Albert, may I ask, since we've got our police chief here? Now that you're here, I do have some questions. Your department's firearms training, does that happen at the county range?
We actually use 3 different facilities based on their availability. We'll either use the Alameda County range
Okay.
Near Camp Parks in Dublin. We'll use the Walnut Creek Police Department range, which is out near Boundary Oaks Golf Course into the hills, or at Contra Costa County's facility off of Marsh Creek Road.
Okay. And then there was a reference in your letter about vehicle training on this site. What's involved?
So
With that.
that would be, if it was utilized for this, it would be slow speed vehicle operations. There are some requirements that California Post mandates that we do regular training. Usually every other year we'll do slow speed training, and that is no lights and sirens, no anything associated with that. It's really confined space vehicle operations. We set up cone patterns, and then our officers will navigate through those cone patterns at slow speeds. Everything that's done associated with lights and sirens or high speed, we use the emergency vehicle operations course in Alameda County.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, with no other questions, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If you'd like to speak, please fill out a speaker card located in the back of the room and submit it to our recording secretary. And again, as a reminder, if you're participating remotely, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to speak when public comment is being taken. I know the answer to this, but do we have any late communications?
Yes, Chair Alpert, prior to the meeting, the Planning Commission received 17 instances of public written comment, and they were provided to the Planning Commission prior to the meeting and are part of the public record.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, we'll go ahead and take any public comments and speakers that are in the room tonight.
Richard D.
Actually, before I start, I just wanted to point out to you that in your agenda packet, you do have the elevation sheet that shows the design that was approved for the fire tower, and it does show a hip roof with the minimal posts. And I would just say that, the structural discovery for those posts, to me, just means that that project wasn't ready to be approved. Anyway, so I'll start. So good evening. My name is Richard Yee. I'm an original Thomas Ranch homeowner and current HOA board member. I'm here tonight to ask the city to not approve the revised project, specifically the fire tower doubling in size from 2,800 square feet to over 5,600 square feet, and a redesign of the fourth floor, making a more massive and visible element. So I'm also requesting a noise mitigation measure. The fire tower is the main reason residents oppose the training facility. It's an attractive nuisance due to its size, height, and use. In our meeting with the fire chief, he agreed to the open, transparent fourth floor design with the hip roof approved by the city. So the 100% increase in building size and the redesign just feels like bait and switch, and it just feels very dishonest. So regarding the noise, there is a condition of approval for the project to comply with the city's noise standards, but the use doesn't currently comply. Why? Here's an excerpt from the city code. It is unlawful for a person to willfully make or continue or cause to be made or continue a loud, unnecessary, or unusual noise which disturbs the peace or quiet of a neighborhood, or which causes discomfort or annoyance to a reasonable person residing in the area. So noise study states train equipment noise is over 80 decibels. Trainees shouting is 77 decibels, and homes across Bollinger will hear up to 78 decibels. In comparison, the ambient road noise measured pre-pandemic is 64 decibels. That's why the project has this condition of approval. Prior to the issuance of building permit, the applicant shall provide a noise analysis for potential wall treatments and implement the recommendations as effective and appropriate to lower noise impacts from training exercises. The assessment shall consider the feasibility of sound walls for either the perimeter of the property or targeted to specific noise sources. Temporary noise barrier associated training activities should be considered as an option. Now, we know an additional study has to be completed because, for example, the current study does not consider potential wall treatments. But the additional study is a requirement for building permits. So that means residents will not be able to comment. So I'm asking the fire and city to agree tonight to replace the open fence with a nice solid stucco wall along Bollinger, and the height will be determined by the acoustical consultant, Alex Salter. And of course, there may be other to be determined noise mitigation measures. If the chief were here, I mean, I would ask him, why are you doubling the size of the fire tower, and why did you change the fourth floor? You talked to us, you understood our concerns, and you offered that design as a compromise, and we all agreed to it. And regarding this wall on Bollinger, it is such an easy concession to give, but it would mean so much to the neighborhood to shield this attractive nuisance and some of the noise. So we're just asking, so the point is, we're asking for fire to be a good neighbor. I mean, these guys all get to retire, move on, but we have to live with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Michelle Yee.
Thank you to the Planning Commission, city staff, fire and police department, and members of our community. We thank the fire and police departments for their important service to our community. We also have family and friends that are firefighters and police officers, and we understand the importance of training. However, they already have a 2,800 square foot fire tower that has been approved. But now they want to double it to over 5,600 square feet. This seems disingenuous and feels like a bait and switch compared to what we had originally agreed to. The larger capacity will allow more activity and cause even more noise to travel into our residential neighborhood. We are asking for a solid perimeter wall to block some of that noise that they will be creating. There are many retired and work from home households in our community that will be affected by the training noise. Granted, we do have noise from Crow Canyon, but it is not fair to compare noise levels from Crow Canyon Road because the road noise is only high during a few hours in the early morning and early evening commute hours. The possible training noise could occur 5 days a week for up to 8 hours a day, which means it would be a much larger impact on the quality of life in our neighborhood. It's time for the fire department to be a good neighbor, not to double the size of the tower and provide a solid perimeter wall to block the training noise that they will be creating. We really want some or a lot of noise mitigation. That's really what is going to bother the neighbors. And so whatever they can do to mitigate that noise is very important to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
No more speaker cards, but we do have a hand raised on Zoom.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and take the caller?
Igor Shmulevich.
Good evening. My name is Igor Shmulevich, and I am a resident of Thomas Ranch and Thomas Ranch HOA president. I echo everything my neighbor Richard E. Said previously about technical details of the project. And I certainly echo my support for the firefighters and the police. We know how important it is for our communities. However, as we mentioned in the first hearing 3 years ago, this is a residential area. This project is qualified as public safety building. This probably wouldn't be an exaggeration to say this is laughable. This is not a public safety building, which is typically a police station like building. This is going to be used for very loud training and other exercises. For example, I never heard the air compressor mentioned before. I think this by itself just going to be terrible, even if it works 2 minutes per day. And many things changed since we had that first hearing 3 years ago. After COVID, at least 50% of my neighbors now work from home. Many people have health problems. Many people have breathing problems after COVID. This is going to generate a lot of noise pollution, chemical pollution, just engines idling. And as police chief mentioned that they previously did training in Bishop Ranch, vacant buildings of Bishop Ranch, which is nowhere near a residential area. Now it's going to be in our backyard. So I don't think there is any good reason to, instead of provide more mitigation, to increase the exposure of every resident living here. I would ask the commission, with all due respect, would you want to have something like this in your backyard? I don't think the answer would not be obvious. So I ask to reduce the exposure instead of increasing it and provide more mitigation with respect to noise and the size of the training exercises. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other cards or hands?
No.
No. Okay, why don't we go ahead and close the public hearing? You have an opportunity to comment back, based on public comment if you choose to. Nope. You don't have, it's optional. Okay. Fellow commissioners, comments, discussion items? Someone want to go first? Everyone's looking down. Okay, Commissioner Wallace.
I didn't even turn on my light and you're calling me. Yeah, having spent most of the day going over the plans, I think the issue about the tower is kind of a red herring because in terms of the increase in space, a lot of it has to do with the basement that no one sees. When I looked at the original version plus the proposed version, really the only difference I saw was on the third floor where they actually had sort of an encapsulated area, whereas on the original it was not. I don't see that as being a major problem. I think the way they've treated the buildings, basically they have put buildings where there was other stuff before. So they're not making more space in that property. They're, if anything, probably a little bit less. The compressor was brought up, but that's something that would have been brought on site as a mobile unit and probably a lot louder than what they're proposing to do now. I think placing it inside the building, which caused the increase inside of the pump station, made a lot of sense. The other issue had to do with the size of the classroom. And when you look at the current proposal versus the one that was approved 3 years ago, really the difference is adding onto the building away from Bollinger Canyon so that people across the street, either at the dental offices or even in the few houses that are above on the first line of hills at Thomas Ranch, wouldn't see the back side because they're basically screened by the front part of the building. So, I think in terms of the changes that they've made, it seems to have been done for a sensible reason. It does not seem to me to be a significant change either visually or noise wise from what we approved and the city council approved 3 years ago. The one question I had, probably we can deal with on the conditions of approval. I still remain a little bit unsettled as to the issue of the noise impact. It does not appear to me that the condition of approval regarding the study of noise that has to be conducted prior to actually using the facility really provides an answer as to who makes a decision whether a sound wall is required. And I would like to have a discussion about that because so far I haven't heard an answer to that question. So I'm prepared to vote in favor of approving the project as modified.
Well, I'm going to follow up with Commissioner Wallace's concern about the wall. And as I've listened, I just have a question in terms of, maybe this is for staff. The ARB suggested the slatted fence instead of the solid wall, but is there any condition or any opportunity or any regulation at this point that the applicant could just say, yeah, we'll build the block wall instead?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
no.
that, okay, I'll leave my opinion till later.
Any comments, questions? Remarks?
I guess the only comments I would make are that I do not agree that the increase in size relative to the tower, since it did not increase the height, has any real material impact on the neighborhood. In fact, the tower is not even in the neighborhood. It's on the edge of the neighborhood. And on the rise above where there are roughly a dozen houses, given the linear distance they are from where it will be located and the vertical height that they will be above it, it seems to me that the change is pretty minimal. So I don't have any concern about the tower. My recollection from the last time we saw this was I had requested and the commission had supported that near the tower, there would be a kind of a sound attenuation wall that was not the full length of the property, but that surrounded the tower to try and blow back the noise. I'm interested in sound mitigation for the property, and will be interested in what my colleagues think about a retain or a solid wall that runs the length of the street frontage. But again, on the tower, I don't have a problem with that. And quite honestly, I'm not going to sit here as a non-professional and tell the professional firefighters what they can have in order to train. I have every expectation when I call the fire department and my house is burning, that I want them to have been trained as far as possible with whatever is necessary. And if they believe that they need this and it is better than what they had, it seems to me that that's what our obligation is. None of us up here are experts in fire training. If it's wrong, if you did the wrong thing, we'll know where to find you. But other than that, I don't have any concerns with this project.
I think the only comment I had that we're going to discuss more is around the sound. And, I think it's been said on the tower, I don't find the tower objectionable. I also find that consolidating the props into the training building to be more good than bad. And the pump station surrounded by concrete as opposed to a mobile station also makes sense to me. I also don't recall all the discussions from the ARB on the slat fence versus the wall. But I know we're going to talk about that. As far as the landscaping goes, there is a landscape plan and it is pending, I think, final approval. And so I have no doubt that the landscaping will turn out high quality and will work for the project. So with that, I would support this project as well. So at this point, I don't think I did this. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And if we want to make a motion in a second, and then we can walk through the resolution and the conditions, I think that might be the best next step.
Mr. I thought you were looking for a motion.
I am. I was going to point at the screen.
Oh.
Button.
I'll verbally do it.
Okay.
And then I'll push the button. I would move approval of resolution 03-23, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Ramon approving the Fire District Training Facility Project Revisions Development Plan Amendment DPA 2022-0017 and Architectural Review AR 2022-0038 located at 1500 Bollinger Canyon Road, Assessor's Parcel Number 209-240-011. I have pushed the button. Thank you.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Marks, seconded by Commissioner Kuznick. And the motion passes 5-0-0. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at the resolution? We'll go through this part relatively quickly. Does anybody see anything on the resolution, pages 1 or 2 that they'd like to call out?
Yeah, I do. It seems to me that there's either a misplacing or we have a redundancy in one of the whereases. It seems to me, and I haven't read it exactly word for word, but whereas number 1, which is the first one, obviously, is basically the same or redundant to whereas number 5, because they both talk about the submissions on September 14th, 2022. My view is that whichever one is the more appropriate one ought to be placed whereas number 5 is. So we start out with when we adopted the original plan back in 2020 and then move forward to September 14th. So we have a linear progression that makes sense.
No concerns from the commission. Do you follow, Ryan, what we're talking about?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. Turning to page 3. Page 4 of 10. 5 of 10. 6 of 10. 7 or 8. And then 9. Okay. Okay. Under the conditions of approval, I think the first one that we wanted to discuss was item 4 on this one, on this page.
Yes, let me read it into the record as it's currently written. The use of the training facility shall be limited to the San Ramon Fire Protection District and San Ramon Police Department, period. Joint training with other agencies is allowed, subject to all operational limitations. I would like there to be a limitation, no matter which agency, and given the total number of agencies, that there be no more than 15 or 20 trainees outside doing training at any one time. I don't have the exact language. I'd be happy to have staff create that after this. But again, I'm just looking for a limitation on the total number of trainees that can be outside doing training at any one time. And that's a noise concern that I have. If you limit the number of trainees, you've limited the amount of noise that can be generated.
Do you want 15 or 20?
Well, I would prefer 15, and that was the highest number that the chief used, but I put in a little fudge room there if you thought we needed more, but I don't think more than 20 would be appropriate. 15 or 20.
I don't see us hitting that, but.
Okay, well then I'll go with 20.
I'm fine with that. Are you fine with that?
I suppose my objection to limiting the number of trainees that can be outside at any one time is that these conditions are not just for today or tomorrow or next year. These conditions are forever, like this project is forever.
They're not, they can be amended. If the fire chief decides he needs more, he can come back before the commission and explain why, and the commission can approve it.
This
All
is,
right, go ahead.
no, I was just going to wonder if this is an option where we would suggest they get, if there's going to be a larger group, something along the lines of an event permit or a special outside the COA permission.
We have done that in the past. We're on an occasion that they could submit for a temporary use permit. It's an administrative process done through the Planning Services Division. And we could allow, every so often a larger event if it needs to be for training.
If we can do that, I would like to see that. If this is going to be an infrequent episode, what I don't want to do is impose a large administrative burden on public safety folks to deal with a real estate problem.
So something to the effect of training exercises in number greater than 20 would be subject to city special event permit or whatever the language.
Temporary use permit.
Temporary use permit.
Yep.
I can support that. Thank you.
Is that agreeable?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay. Anything else on item 5? That's condition 5. That's not allowing leasing to outside agencies, which we already learned is not done. Items page 2 of 9, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 10 finishes up on page 3.
On 2 of 9, I have one.
Okay.
Condition 6, in the very last line, after the word activities is the word should. I would strike that and insert the word shall.
Okay, so let me raise the question that I posed when I had comments. It says, let me tell you what my concern is. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall provide a noise analysis for potential wall treatments and implement the recommendations as effective and appropriate to lower noise impacts from training exercises. So who gets to make a decision as to what is effective and appropriate to lower the noises?
Would that go back to the zoning administrator?
It would. So as part of the permit issuance, they would submit the noise acoustical analysis prepared by whomever they select, the expert in the field. And that expert would provide a recommendation and maybe some options to be considered. But we would look to implement the measure that would be most effective in reducing the noise levels. As
So-
we would.
So is the language in COA 6 sufficient to allow the city to require the implementation of whatever noise abatement procedures the city deems fair and reasonable?
Implement the recommendation. It would be stronger if we added for review and approval of the zoning administrator.
I'm sorry, could you speak up?
It would be stronger if we included for review and approval of the zoning administrator.
Okay, I would go along with that, because what I wanted was the ability to enforce it, not just to create a study.
So we'll add language to 6 to change should to shall, and that the zoning administrator will make the final decision on after the city. Perfect. Okay. Anything else on page 2 of 9? 3 of 9. Now we're going, yes, 3 of 9.
Item 11 or condition 11, regarding the use of potable water. There's language in there that, again, I just don't agree with. The use of potable water could be allowed if the applicant demonstrated that there would not be a feasible way to secure recycled water. What is meant by feasible? There are trucks all over the Bay Area that deliver by water truck water from areas away from a construction site. My reasoning is we are in a water crisis. We can't use potable water just because somebody has to pay more than they want to pay to get a water truck to bring the water to their site. That's a cost of doing business. We have to do what we can do to help East Bay Mud keep as much water available that's potable for appropriate potable water use. And so I would take that out. They have to use recycled water no matter where they get it, no matter what the cost, for dust control, washing equipment, street cleaning, and all the other things typically that water is used on a construction site. That is what I would like the language to reflect.
That's the limitation.
Yeah, this is during construction.
Okay, just.
During construction.
There are some constraints regarding availability of reclaimed water, particularly now. It's in very high demand and it's not always available. There are shortages, and I guess the question is, what's reasonable, driving to Tracy to get reclaimed water? Or, I mean, there's a proximity issue that makes.
I understand that, Lauren, and I know it puts some people in an uncomfortable position, but what's reasonable? Using drinking water?
Well, I guess I would argue that there's also costs associated with shipping water, greenhouse gas, vehicle trips, generation. So pick your poison.
Well, my poison is that I think we need to save the potable water and require that recycled water from wherever it may have to come from be used. If there are other ways to deal with a site other than use of water, and sometimes street sweeping can be used. Sometimes equipment doesn't have to be cleaned as frequently, but in the end, the condition, in my opinion, does not reflect where we are as an area and as a state relative to drinking water. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the other four disagree, but that's how I feel about it.
So I don't disagree with the concept. And I don't know if Mr. License knows the answer to this. I am under the impression that water that's used for dust control where construction personnel are working has to be potable from an OSHA requirement. Is that not
I'm not sure.
correct?
I'm
Okay.
not sure on that. Yeah.
What I don't want to do is impose a condition that requires the applicant to do something that's going to get them afoul with OSHA and make them come back.
I've
So,
cer-
yeah, I mean, legal, if it's legal and feasible, and maybe we define what feasible means, I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that we're not creating a problem.
Well, and I believe the statement at the end of that condition where it talks about could be allowed, but there is there's an approval by the zoning administrator also. So there's a check-in that if they say they can't use potable water or they can't use reclaimed water because there's none available, then that provides some sort of flexibility that in the event they're getting through construction and they can't get reclaimed water, that they can continue to complete their project in a timely manner.
that's essentially what you've got here.
Exactly. Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, to me, the cost, if it's justified on the basis of cost, that's not reasonable. The crisis in the water situation is more important than the cost that an applicant may have in complying with a condition. If it is true that there is simply none anywhere within 100 miles or some distance like that, then fine. I'm willing to do that, but I don't want it to be just a cost basis. We are missing opportunities to save water if we do not crack down on some of this. Well, gee, I have to pay to truck it into, and I pay too much.
Well, would it work to change the words "a feasible way" to would not be possible?
So if I can just chime in again. This is not a private real estate developer. This is a public entity.
I knew that.
Well, when we start talking about what's feasible and what's cost effective, I'm not prepared to sign a public entity up to import water from Vancouver, Washington, no matter what the cost. I mean, these are tax dollars. I mean, if it's not feasible, I don't think it's reasonable for us as the city of San Ramon to tell a public entity who's trying to complete a public safety project that they have to do something no matter what the cost. That seems unreasonable. It's another public entity. And I do think that cost considerations matter. And I don't think that it's appropriate for us to be imposing a condition on their project that makes their project impossible to build because they can't get reclaimed or recycled water at a reasonable cost. I think cost matters here. If we want to say the high-rise developer, we can make them pay because they're a private market rate developer, whatever. That's something you could sell me on, but to require a public entity to comply with a condition, no matter what the cost, just seems like an overreach. I agree that I don't want potable water used for construction purposes, but there has to be limits on that.
So I have two thoughts on this. So one thought is, in the event of reclaimed or recycled water is not available, what happens if we don't have water for washing equipment and street cleaning? I see the dust control, that might be an issue. But to what extent are those three things so vital that we might allow our drinking water to be used for those? So that's question number one. The other question is, could we add in language that says with a water status clause that the use of potable water, shall be allowed only if the state is not in a water emergency, or some language in that which says if we're in a drought status, then no.
So if I may, through the chair, section D through the zoning ordinance under performance standards actually does identify that in determining feasibility of the use of recycled water shall look at the availability of reclaimed water, distance of transportation, impacts on transit and the road system, site-specific constraints, and scale of development. So the code itself does have the backup to the condition of approval that how to determine what's feasible.
I'm sorry, what code is that?
Our zoning ordinance, section D3,
I'm sorry, D or B?
D is in David.
D3.
And Debbie, I don't think I heard you say economically feasible or financially.
That was not in there, no.
So it's all about schedule and availability, it sounds like, or impact on transportation.
Correct.
So under that definition, if it's available but expensive and it's in Tracy, they can get it. And they are obligated to get it rather than use potable water. Would that be your interpretation, Debbie?
That would be one, yes, that could be an interpretation. I'm looking at the, what was that what?
Transit.
Transportation, that would be the one. I'm sorry. Thank you, Lauren. The distance. So the distance is one issue of consideration.
So what is the maximum distance that would be considered feasible? So there's a lot of the ambiguities in this stuff that doesn't get me, at least, where I think we need to be, which is it's more important to protect the water supply than to worry about that particular cost for any development. Because if I'm going to worry about the cost there, why would I require a concrete block wall the length of the project, which is much more expensive than the fence that they're talking about? In any event, I'm one commissioner. There's 4 others. You can all decide how you want to go with this. That's my recommendation.
And I will add too that under this performance standard, it does in parentheticals does note additional cost is not the primary determination regarding feasibility. It really focuses on let me do the on-site boundary. It says recycled water shall be used unless it is not feasible, or if there's an environmental concern. So adjacent to a creek was one of the carve-outs the commission had put in and used for the construction activities. So
Debbie, we talk about this almost on every project.
we do.
Do you have some real world examples, like on recent construction? Are we using potable water or recycled water? Let's say BR6, let's say the training or the administrative building that's being built right now. I don't know if they did grading, the EOC building.
There was grading, but I'm not sure of what type of water was used. I don't remember. I'm BR6. Do you, Mr. Barr?
I don't.
Yeah.
Okay, and then
I
BR1A.
don't think it was required for Golden Skate due to the size of the project.
As I recall, that they wanted a condition which was a distance about how far reclaimed water was from their
I
site.
think it
That's
was,
right.
yes, it was Pleasanton to the facility in Pleasanton, maybe.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Korea was the last big project that had reclaimed
Clean water.
water. And they
Okay.
created a connection.
A
point.
connection, I recall that. And do we know what they're doing over at BR1A? Are they grading with potable or non-potable water?
I do not know.
They probably would have had to come to you to use potable water, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, let me back up here. Did you say there was a connection point for recycled water at Faria?
Past tense.
Past tense has been removed.
Oh, too bad. Okay. It
The
would have
other
been a
thing-
solution.
The other consideration is stormwater management
Yeah.
as well. It's not proper to discharge reclaimed water into the storm drain system.
I'm not sure what your point is there.
It's another consideration in terms of how you manage the use of reclaimed water. There are additional protections that need to be put in place on the site to eliminate discharge into the system. Now, those are in place for any type of construction activity typically, but it's just another point.
So the proposal was to remove the last phrase. But then we also came to learn that the zoning administrator does have final determination, and the definition of feasible is captured in the zoning ordinance. So any suggestions on how to resolve this issue?
Could you read the zoning ordinance, but a lot slower, please?
All righty, so the zoning administrator, in determining feasibility of the use of recycled water, shall look at the availability of reclaimed water, distance of transportation, impacts of transit on the road system, site-specific constraints, and scale of development.
Well, I guess what that amounts to is that if we adopted that particular provision, we would be given the zoning administrator discretion to decide whether the applicant had proven the case that it was unfeasible to use recycled water for 3 or 4 different reasons. I guess the question is whether you want to trust the zoning administrator to make a good decision on that point, as opposed to opt for a thou shalt not use potable water, period, end of statement.
We send an awful lot of final decisions to the zoning administrator, and I don't think we're ready to, I'm not ready to take everything back, personally, on this,
I say we leave it in.
allow the zoning administrator to make the
Yes.
choice. And the feasible, perhaps we could just make it clear as defined in D5, whatever, is just to highlight the criteria the zoning administrator shall use.
Yeah, we could, you don't need to because it's the code, but if you wanted to, we're more than happy to put that reference in.
I surrender.
It's so
We-
not like you.
We will get this language right eventually, and then we will tell you when we do.
We have a code update coming, so so.
Okay. Commissioner Marks might not be with us, but he's going to follow along. Okay. Moving to page 4, you had one other you wanted to bring up at some point. You have a sense where that's going to be? Page 5. I know there's one item that Commissioner Marks wants to stick in someplace. We just need to figure out the right place. Kind of scrolling along. Okay, page 7 is the sidewalk one.
Oh, that wasn't a condition.
Oh, it wasn't a condition. Oh, okay. We'll just talk about that at some point. Okay, we'll get through the conditions first. Pages 8 or pages 9. Okay, so I think we're all through the resolution. Do you want to talk about this before the item that you saw before we vote?
I don't think this should be a condition, but it's more of a, if you can, the public sidewalk in front of the fire site between the mailbox going almost all the way up to Crow Canyon and a little beyond the mailbox is pretty severely cracked. It seems to me that since the site's going to be pretty well torn up anyway, if you can, it might be an opportune time to repair the public sidewalk. The cracking there is going to lead to other problems with water intrusion. I just thought since you've got all the equipment out there and you'll be doing some pouring of concrete, might be a good time to try and do it.
Just so I understand, you're talking the sidewalk on Bollinger?
On Bollinger, where the mailbox is. There's some pretty severe cracking under the mailbox, and I think it goes in the direction of Crow Canyon, and maybe a little bit behind the mailbox.
Yeah, we'd be happy to look at that and see what we can do to dress it up.
Got the trucks out there.
And engineering services is in the audience, so
So-
they've heard that comment too. So we can, I'm sure Arad will follow up on that.
I see him ready to fix it tomorrow. Okay, good.
So I just have one more thought, and it's not really a condition of approval, but as we were talking about a sound wall, the thought occurred to me if the sound wall could look a lot like how the tower was built, maybe those two would kind of sort of one would merge into the other. So just a thought.
Okay, I think we're through with the resolution and the conditions. So, and we've had a motion and we've had a second. So I think we are ready to take a vote.
Just so we're clear, does the motion include the modifications that were made on the DS?
Yeah, so you made the motion, but you agreed as modified at the day.
All right, okay.
Okay, the motion does pass 5-0-0-0. Thank you all for the discussion.
Through the chair, just a statement real quick. The actions of the planning commission are subject to appeal. Anyone seeking to file an appeal on this approval needs to file the proper forms and paperwork with the city clerk, including the basis for the appeal and the proper fee. The 10-day appeal period will end on March 3rd at 5 p.m.
Question, when does the appeal time start to run?
Now.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Tomorrow will be day one.
I have a different reason for asking that question.
Okay, thank you all. Okay, moving on to item 11.1 Planning Commission meeting times. Ms. Chamberlain.
Good evening. So as we are wrapping up the pandemic and people have gotten back to their normal lives, but we still have our commission and council meetings on Zoom. There is the ability, since residents can participate remotely now, that the commission could start their meetings at an earlier time. I have looked at other jurisdictions and it's arranged beginning in Danville at 5 p.m. to 6 or 6:30 in about 5 other jurisdictions, and some still stay with 7 o'clock. But it's the discretion of the commission if they like to have us move our meetings to, I would suggest 6 o'clock as a start time. 5 is still a bit early for folks getting home, but it's something for the commission discussion option they can take.
Okay, so this is, are you proposing that this be a trial that we would evaluate to see effectiveness, or we'll just change and, my personal opinion is, we have gotten good public participation, both in person and Zoom, and would hate to see that participation drop off. And I am a fan of changing the start time, but I would hate to do it at the expense of public participation. So if there's a way that we can take a look and see if participation seriously drops off, then not stay at 6 p.m. and move back to 7 p.m., but at least to try it.
We can monitor it, certainly. And with Zoom and YouTube, the streaming channel now, folks really can pick it up from wherever they are in their car driving home or at their home making dinner. So, but we certainly can monitor it. And we may find that if the commission wants to go earlier, which I probably wouldn't suggest, we can also have those discussions down the road, but we can take a look towards the end of the year and see how it's going.
And I understand that, attendance usually is related to what we're talking about. Yeah. Any other comments, suggestions, ideas? It really is up to us whether we can get here at 6 o'clock, for, jobs and commuting and things like that.
I'm really tempted to make some wisecrack, but I won't. I actually, the comparison of last week when we met at 6 and we were done at 10 instead of being done at 11. It's not the start time, it's the ending time is at my age in life was probably the more prevailing concern.
For my part, I'd prefer the 6 o'clock start time. As I mentioned last time, going until midnight is just a killer when you have to work in the morning. And I'd rather sacrifice a little bit at the end of my day to make sure that we get our business done in 6.5 hours, considering how much work we've got to do over the next 6 months. So thank you.
Good point. We do have an extra hour before we have to make a motion to extend. We start at 6.
Well, and we already have extra meetings scheduled
At least
February,
one, at least
March, and April. because we have so much work to do.
Yeah.
So I'm very much in favor of the 6 o'clock start time.
Commissioner Wallace, do you have?
I swing either way, 6 or 7, whatever the majority wants.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner Marks, I know you're.
It would not be appropriate for me to weigh in on this as it won't affect me. So
Okay, okay. Well, I
I'll be
think,
abstaining.
okay. And you didn't ask for a motion. No, I think with monitoring it to see if we see any super negative impact or get comments, then I'm in favor of it as well.
Okay, great.
Great.
Just so I'm clear, we are now going to start our meetings at 6 p.m., subject to reconsideration. If at a later date, it becomes apparent that it is causing too much of a problem with public participation.
That's my sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Or negative feedback that we get through any channels.
Okay, I just want to make it clear that we are starting in the future at 6 p.m.
Okay.
And I would also add that, you know, given all of our social media opportunities, that this change would be well noticed and out there in all the different ways that people can especially find someone on Nextdoor. That's where all really important social media is.
We do post our agendas on Nextdoor, so we can highlight the earlier start time too. And
Right. And our most recent workshop that was at 6, we had some of the best attendance we've had in a long time. So people notice. Okay. Item 12, study session, Commissioner Lazen reports and or interest items. Do we have anybody who attended you have, I think Commissioner Wallace, you might have attended open space.
I would just mention that I attended the open space committee meeting last week. I think open space is trying to match the planning commission and how long their meetings last. This was 3 hours. The subject was a report that they're going to give to the city council about the open space committee. So that's the report I have on that. I had one other question, but I'll pass on. Oh, I know what it was. On the TAC ad hoc committee, we only had one person who was up for appointment. That was Bob DuPont, who's been on the committee forever. In fact, he was on the general plan review committee with me back in the 1990s. We have 2 openings. I guess the city has to publish the fact that it's open, and when we get some applications, we'll then be in a position to ask for interviews.
yes, that's my understanding.
Okay.
Okay. I guess it's up to you. Lauren, what's on deck?
Well, on March 7th, we have a Chevron Park workshop, 6 p.m. start time. It'll be in the chamber with boards out in the rotunda for the public to view, and we can have the discussion here and on Zoom. And then on the 21st of March, we'll also be doing a workshop to talk about mixed use district standards as well as definitions. And that's a precursor to the general plan update actions and rezoning.
And so the special meeting in March, we had scheduled on March 16th, that will not occur. But the April 13th one,
Yes, there'll be a joint meeting with council on April 13th on the
Okay.
general plan.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, and I can put on my calendar, we have meetings currently scheduled for March 7th, March 21st, and then a joint meeting with the people upstairs on April 13th.
That's correct.
Okay,
and then April 4th will be canceled,
I'm sorry, April 4th will be,
canceled.
oh, okay.
Commission meeting, yeah. Some folks are taking vacations that week.
Oh, I think we're all entitled to take vacation
What's
once in a
that?
while.
What's that? Okay. And then 3/7 will be a 6 p.m. start. By 3/21, will we be moved to our new time at 6 p.m. or?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay, so 3/21 we'll do 6 p.m. and maybe we'll get together a little early that night.
yeah, and 3/7 is your regular scheduled meeting. We're just calling it a workshop. It could be your regular agenda with just item 11.1
Mhm.
too, so.
Perfect. Okay. And then 3/21, we might want to pencil in an earlier start. Sort of. Okay.
Just
And we as,
I'm sorry, quick question to staff. As we are looking down towards the mixed use district standards, is there going to be a report back to the larger commission, from the ad hoc committee? Just sort of a summary. I know you guys were actively working on mixed use and retail and that kind of stuff. And we were working diligently towards that conclusion. I just wondered if there could be a report back to the larger committee or where that stands.
I mean, at this point, we were coming with with information that's been prepared by our consultant team related to the design standards. But there's no reason why we couldn't provide a summary of the discussions that came forward, or even the ad hoc committee's members themselves could add input as to their thoughts on this process.
Well, it just seems like this is just kind of trickling and fading off and never to be heard from again. I just would like to have that sense that that there has been a conclusion and a report to the larger body of what has happened and what recommendations might have come from.
The answer to the question about recommendations, there's been no conclusion. We've had a lot of discussion
Okay.
about what to do, how to phrase it. It sort of melds into the subject of objective standards. Who's doing the consulting work for the objective standards?
Mentor Harnish.
Mentor Harnish, okay.
Okay. Well, thank you. I would appreciate some sort of summation. I think that's worthy of our time and on the public record as well.
Sure.